Welcome to a new episode of TTG Conversations, 5 questions video series. This episode is focusing on business travel today and into the foreseeable future. And to give us insights on this topic is Carl Jones, the Vice President and Head of Travel, Asia Pacific and Greater China with SAP Concur. Carl is an industry veteran with extensive experience throughout Asia Pacific, having held regional leadership roles in countries including China, Singapore and Thailand. And in his role at SAP Concur, Carl oversees the travel strategy, management, innovation, and partnerships for the company's travel portfolio, which includes Concur Travel, Request, Locate, TripLink, and TripIt. So welcome, Carl. Thank you for giving us your time.
Pleasure to be here, Karen. Thank you.
Great. So I've got 5 questions for you, and here's the first. SAP Concur's latest study clearly shows that there is no two ways about safe travels. Employers just have to make sure that it happens, otherwise the staff will reject the trip or even reject the job. So how do you think this will change the way companies manage travel going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So I think there were certainly some key findings in the study that were very, very interesting, and certainly you've pulled out some of the depth of feeling that people have around travel going forward with some of their concerns. I think a few of the interesting things as well, if we look holistically at the study, a third of people were excited as well to get back to travel, and even in India, over half of people there, I think 51%, wanted to get back to travel, but there's certainly a concern there. So I think from my point of view, I think over the last 10, 15 years, organizations have really focused on how to keep their business travel costs low. And doing that through efficient methods and so forth. I think now the shift is going to be very much more around the duty of care element. How do organizations address the concerns of their employees, which are clearly coming through in this study, and what practical measures can they do? So I think practically where you'll start to see organizations focus, and where we're already seeing organizations focus, is around this element of how do I protect my travelers when I'm overseas? What do I need to do? What is it that I can do as an organization to better address some of these concerns? Because I don't want attrition. I don't want people to feel they need to change roles within an organization just to avoid travel. So I think that's the first. I think the second element of it as well is around corporate policy. So having a look at your corporate policy, and traditionally organizations have been very good at one end of the spectrum around business travel, accident insurance, so that could be missed baggage or missed planes, lost luggage, and so forth. That's normally looked after via some corporate payment tools or credit cards. I think at the other end of the scale, you've got things like repatriation, and organizations have a very clear policy around that and normally a clear process. But it's really that middle piece. What happens if you're on a business trip and you sprain your ankle, or you catch a cold? And I think with the COVID situation and the new normal going forward, it really needs to be clarified. What do organizations do in those circumstances? And I think the final piece which came through was around the desire, which was almost overwhelming. 96% or so of people said they wanted greater training to understand these sorts of elements. So I think if you look holistically, A, you've got some concerns, B, you've got a desire for training, and C, you've got some gaps or potential gaps to focus on in your travel policy and process. I think it's a good opportunity now, while people aren't traveling, for organizations to take a step back and think about what they do next.
Good point. And your study has also highlighted certain expectations around the way people want to travel for work. So preference for the shortest direct flights, preference for avoidance of major air hubs, and limited use of public transport, for example. Now, this is going to have some impact on travel expenses and arrangements. So how will such expectations affect companies' ability to return to business trips as soon as possible?
Yeah, so one of the things I've been advising organizations here in the region for, as you pointed out in the introduction, at 10, 15 years or so, around how can they streamline and organize their processes to better manage corporate travel spend. And one of the best ways to do that is to have a very clear policy around which selection of carriers take place. So which airlines do you choose, which hotels do you stay in? And I think this is a great opportunity, again, to address some of those concerns. There's tools available which very easily restrict the types of travel and the search terms to only show things like direct connections. So you as an organization can very easily, very readily address those concerns in your corporate travel policy. Now, by doing that, you can then go to specific airlines and leverage your corporate spend and say, hey, Mr. Airline, we've got X amount of spend that we'll be directing to you. How can we come to a commercial agreement? And how can you help me from a commercial point of view? So trying to rationalize that. I think as well, you're right in terms of the expectation is that corporate travel tickets, particularly airlines and hotels, will probably go slightly up in price. I think that's going to be counterbalanced by less people traveling. And this focus around what is permissible travel, what does your government of origin permit, what was your government of destination allow, what does the employee themselves feel comfortable doing, and what do you as an organisation allow as travel itself. So I think you'll start to see a little bit of a reduction in what is permissible, particularly as we're doing today on Zoom, and having technology that allows you to meet in virtual capacity. But I think if you start to do that, and then you bring in technology that says, hey, let's be smarter about where we choose our travel, who we choose to travel, and making sure that when people are on the road, that travel can help them. I think that's really important as well.
Good. Okay. Another interesting discovery by your study is the low reliance on corporate travel agencies and a corporate travel booking tool when business trips are resumed. So only 18% intend to go to the company's travel agency, while 17% expect to use the corporate travel booking tool. Most prefer to actually book themselves at 23%. So how is this different from pre-COVID? And do you see this impacting compliance requirements as well as the relevance of TMCs?
Yeah, look, this was probably my most surprising statistic of this survey. That this came through, that people said, hey, I still want to try and book. But I think when I took a step back and really thought through this, I think it's combined with another statistic, which is this 96% of travellers said they want greater training. And I think this is an opportunity for travel management companies, for tech providers, and particularly for travel managers and organisations to really emphasise what is the value of a travel management company. And let's be real, if you book your travel independently, you're on your own if things go wrong. And you don't probably want that in the COVID era. If your organization may or may not know where you are, certainly not easily. They may or may not know you've traveled or you've booked a business trip. So it's very difficult for an organization to then provide the safety that people have said in the study that they really want. So I think this is a great opportunity for TMCs and organizations to go back to basics, to go to their employees and say, hey, this is why we have a travel management company. Here's the services they offer. Here's the reporting that we see. Here's the way that we can pre-approve your trip automatically using technology before you even book your ticket. So I think this is a good opportunity to really explain to people the value that having a travel management company or using a corporate booking tool and pre-approval tool to get that compliance and knowledge in is really, really critical. I once traveled with a colleague in a different organization who'd booked his trip directly, and I'd booked mine through our travel management company. And we got into problems. We missed a connection in Mumbai. It took me 5 minutes on a phone call to rebook my flight the next morning through my TMC on their emergency line. He didn't manage to make it because he couldn't get through on the airline and was stuck there and ended up getting a completely different flight and paying for the ticket. Right? There's a very, very simple example of where the value comes in, right? And so you certainly don't want in the new normal to be in a situation where you're trying to do that. And as I say, it's addressing this real concern that people had that they do have trepidation about the trip itself. So you want that almost insurance policy, as it were, to make sure that you're looked after by your organisation. And the only way to do that is through policy, booking tools, and travel companies.
Okay, and that leads us nicely to the next question. Do you see AI and data science helping to improve corporate travel confidence and the travel experience in this very stressful travel environment?
Yeah, I certainly do. I think it's a continuation of where we've been going, though, to be honest, Karen. I think over the last year or two, certainly at SAP Concur, we've been trying to develop our tools and to build in AI and machine learning into processes, and that'll continue. One of the reasons I've joined this organization, I get passionate about this organization, is the ability around analytics to really tailor trips. And I get very excited about some of the upcoming technologies and methodology that we can use to personalize trips. I think in the short term, where we're at the moment, though, it's using the AI and the machine learning in various parts of the trip. So it's making sure that, for instance, you mentioned Locate at the start. It's a tool that allows organizations to easily see where their employees are on a business trip. So just say they have a concern around, say, Tokyo. Maybe there's been an outbreak of COVID in Tokyo, for instance, and they just want to check who's on the business trip at the moment or who's got an upcoming trip. They can very easily see that, and they can try and pin down where people are through pulling in data from different sources. So that type of AI is a really essential tool, I think, going forward. So I get very excited about the role of automation and the role of AI and ML in corporate travel programs for the upcoming years.
Good. Okay. Among leisure travelers, priority is now given to travel and tourism suppliers that are deemed to be most reliable, clean, and flexible. And pricing has, moved down the line. Do you think the same criteria apply to corporate travel vendors? And what will this mean for suppliers looking to get into the corporate travel program in this new environment?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think, we touched a bit earlier around people feeling they wanted to book direct. And one of the reasons for that is, and it is a misconception, by the way, but it is a feeling that they can get a cheaper ticket themselves. Oh, if I book myself, I can get a cheaper ticket. Primarily the reason, by the way, for that is most travel companies speak to the travel manager and they restrict the type of tickets. They may exclude certain airlines on safety grounds. They may only allow flexible tickets and not restricted tickets, because they anticipate people changing their business plans when they're overseas, and those tickets are generally a little bit more expensive. So you can get the cheaper tickets, you just have to ask your TMC for them. But I think that's been a driver. Obviously this study seems to indicate that's less of a driver now, and safety is going to be the priority, in which case you want to make sure that your company knows where you are, that you've gone on a carrier or stay at a hotel that's been pre-approved. And organizations for sure are starting to look at things like safety around hotels. Good example, obviously, here in Singapore, we have the SG Clean initiative, obviously at the moment focused to staycations rather than business travel coming in. But I see that as a really good anticipatory groundwork that the government's done here to lay that groundwork, as it were, for incoming business travellers, because they will come at some point. And I think having these criteria of an accommodation that says we're going to follow these steps to certify with an SG Clean type program will help allay some of those fears. I think the traditional methods of choosing hotels in an RFP process, I think, will then focus around safety and cleanliness as part of the RFP, and not just in the past it's gone from room rate and amenities and so forth. I think this will start to include a lot more cleanliness factors, hygiene factors in corporate travel selection. And then back to this education and training the companies can do with their employees, building that in to say to them, guys, there are cheaper hotel options, yes, but we've chosen these because we feel they meet our corporate standards of hygiene and keep you as safe as possible when you travel. So I think that it all comes back to this loop of communication between the travel manager or the procurement person or whoever is in charge of your corporate travel program, all the way back to educating the employees why you're making those choices and why those choices are important. And if you step out of those traditional routes and you do things on your own, you lose that umbrella of safety, and that's not where organizations, I think, want to go.
Yep, especially not now in this new normal.
Yeah, and the other thing which is quite interesting, we're certainly playing with this, is having that criteria much more readily available on the screen during the booking process. So traditionally, instead of doing it yourself and going on different sites, but using your corporate tool, which you know has been developed with these choices of a travel manager inside them, and then having this data and this information so that you at that point of sale where you book the hotel, you can make these choices yourself, and you know, A, you're within policy, and B, that you're choosing a hotel that meets what you feel is acceptable and what your organization feels is acceptable. So definitely we've been doing things with a lot of our existing clients to say, how do you want to reconfigure some of the tools that you have? How do you want to start refocusing them for when things really go back to normal and travel comes back to normal, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later.
Oh yeah, that's right. So thank you so much, Carl. That's all the 5 questions we have for you today. Thank you for devoting your time to us. Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure, and it's. I can't wait to meet you face to face at some point. Social distancing, but at some point, Karen, we can meet face to face.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too.
Oh,
now,
nice.
My dear audience, if there are topics that you'd like us to tackle on this video, just leave your comments below, and we'd love to hear from you. Yeah. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.